trauma that is untreated within our communities, within our young people, and the effects that has on the body and the mind. And I know that there's symptoms of stomach aches, headaches, inflammation that I suffer from, autoimmune diseases, any of those physical effects from trauma that any of us have. I would like to ask if any of you have experienced some of those symptoms from trauma in your body or in your mind, and what did that look like, and how did you process and get through that?
I think I can speak to this a little bit in that trauma can show up in so many different ways, and those are the types of people that show up in the doctor's office and they're having symptoms of like back pain, stomach ache, headaches, like you're saying, and even eventually leading to like hypertension and later on stroke, or you overeat, so then you get obese and then you get diabetes, things like this. These are things that show up and sometimes can go undiagnosed when you go and see your regular doctor, because your doctor doesn't understand the trauma that you're going through and things that they cannot understand because then they don't look like us, right? So then you get labeled with either you're hypochondriac because they can't find anything physically wrong with you, or that there's something psychological going on, but nothing they want to refer you to a mental health counselor for. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times I do really push my patients to advocate for themselves. Like if you're feeling certain symptoms and you know that you've been through so much trauma that you should seek help, like for a counselor. If your insurance doesn't cover it, there's other ways to go through it. Like with our job, for example, they offer free services up to 6 times a year. So that's just a stepping stone for you to be able to seek help. And I've been able to use those services myself, especially with everything that's gone on this year, just to be able to have a chance to talk to somebody. And for me, my stress shows up exactly like on my shoulders. My back pain is always more severe when I'm feeling like a big toll on me.
Wow. Thank you, Esther. I really appreciate that. I've got a question. I'm going to toss one out. Henry, you seem pretty shy and retiring, and I don't know that you're going to be willing to tell us what you really think about this, but I'm wondering about the reentry population that you work with, and if you've seen some of those same issues, the mental stress and the trauma showing up as physical ailments with the reentry population.
For you, Henry?
Oh, that was for me. Sorry.
Yeah, that's for you, Henry.
Okay, yeah, no, I heard the question. Okay, cool. No, as far as the reentry population, I mean, the main priority is getting housing, right? And just to give you just an example what that looks like when you come home, right? When I first got out, right, you get dizzy in the car. You haven't been in the car in a long time. So you're getting dizzy. You're afraid to eat because when you eat, you're going to throw up automatically because this food is so pure. They give us so much preserved food in there that it's just like, man, it keeps you on this thin diet. They shrunk everybody. They took our weights. They took everybody's healthy food, and everybody's just kind of skinny people because they're more manageable, right? So people come from a lot of that institutionalized abuse, and they get anxiety disorders. They get panic attacks. Some people deal with ADHD, bipolarism, right? We got people that deal with a little bit of schizophrenic, right? They're paranoia. They don't trust folks. So trauma affects your mental system. You know what I mean? Meaning your belief system, your perception of reality, your relationships, right? Your emotions, your thoughts. And so that in turn shapes how you behave towards people. And those behaviors, when they're rooted in pain and hurt and fear and in trauma, they're going to become dysfunctional. And dysfunctionalism will eventually lead to destructive lifestyles. Could be drinking, alcohol, and the various types of lifestyles that people do to escape, right? That eventually lead to early death, right? And I know for me, like in my experience, as far as my trauma, I'm always having tension in the back of my head, right? I always have different physiological problems because of the high levels of adrenaline and pressure of deadlines, of trying to help this person while this person's in that jam, while I already had a whole set day and these things unfolded. And now I got to go, help this person that just got locked up and whatever, right? So it's like sometimes it gets busy like that, and being constantly on that grind, not taking vacation because you're part-time here and then part-time there to maintain your independence and your hours to do effective work. You know, you struggle a lot, and that stress wears you down. Eating out a lot, all that unhealthy food. I was 150 for like years, for like 15 years almost in prison, right? I come out here, and like 3 months I'm 165, and 6 months I'm 185. The doctor says, you're like three pounds almost overweight. Made the little skinny dude. And it's these foods, right? And so like having to educate ourselves on how to eat healthy, how to sleep. You know, all this plays a fact. Some other people can't sleep because of the trauma, right? So trauma is something that lives with you long term, and there hasn't been enough research done on the long term effects of incarceration that is updated. And I think as we move forward, we really need to start asking those questions to better serve our returning population.
Yeah, absolutely.
I couldn't agree with you more. Henry. That actually is a great segue into the next topic, the next question that I have for you guys. And then with respect to mental distress, you know, people can experience fogginess, unclear thinking, like Henry touched on, flashbacks, nightmares. The list goes on and on and on. And it's not normal. It's often not even really talked about, or we don't know much about, especially if you're experiencing it yourself. But would you say to the youth that is it stigma, or is it just a lack of awareness that keeps brothers from seeking out the help when they're experiencing these types of symptoms? Or are there other contributing factors to that? And what are those?
Look, there's various. You got the culture. The culture has a strong drive. And the culture leads into what's called the lifestyle addiction. When people think addiction, they think about substances or alcohol or pills and food or whatnot. But the lifestyle of gangs, we have our own way of dressing, our own way of talking, our beliefs, our philosophy, you know, and it's its own style and its own culture. And so, but all the rules are designed to lead to either death or incarceration, right? And so, you know, people get so consumed by that, by the need to fulfill human needs, right? These kids have unmet human needs, like the need to be loved, the need to be appreciated, validated, you know, and so nobody's ever allowed them to find healing, forgiveness, or empowered them to see the reality outside of the pain or the projection of the pain that they cause based on their trauma. And so, you know, it's a very challenging population. Let me tell you, like working with as you guys would know, those that work with young people, working with those populations is very, very, very challenging. I've done work in South Sacramento and Luther Burbank for a couple of years there, working with our highest risk needs population, right? And it was challenging, but we make breakthroughs, right? But they also need one-on-one. We didn't have the man capacity to. We're already running 5. We started with 5 workshops, you know, once every week. We're like, man, we're running out of staff, we're running out of grants, to 2, to 3, to just one facilitator. And it's like, you know, the nonprofit game and trying to serve the youth. It's a tough, challenging game too when you're first starting, and you know, it takes time to get the resources to hire the staff and provide the proper training to do effective work, not just as a mentor, but also doing workshops and checking in with parents, training the teachers. It requires all the community needs to be involved in part of the solution, as opposed to labeling a child as an at-risk adolescent and sending them to probation and juvenile hall and then long-term imprisonment.
Right.
So Justin, can I jump in there?
Please.
You know, you had talked about sleeping, and I think that one of the things about sleeping is that there's intermittent sleep where a person can wake up throughout the night, and then they go back to sleep, and then some people try to go to sleep, and then they just lay there all night, and then at the 4 or 5 o'clock hour, then they start to get sleepy, but it's time to get up. And a lot of that is because of the trauma and a lot of the things that they're processing in their mind and the thought process. And so they're continuously ruminating over those particular things, and they're not able to get it out, whether it means talking to somebody, writing it down in a journal, or even trying to exercise. So there are different interventions that a person can do to try to lessen the symptoms, but the trauma is still there. In fact, trauma is at a cellular level. Mm-hmm. So when the trauma happens, let's say at age 13, let's say that you witness somebody getting killed, or you witness domestic violence or something of that sort. At that age, at 13 years old, you're stunted in your development as far as being able to cope, those coping skills. And from that point on of your trauma, you are dealing with the trauma as you get older as a 13-year-old. So you can be 30, 40 years old, and if you haven't gotten past that trauma, which is basically getting the education and getting someone to talk to you and being informed, you're going to, at 40 years old, be still dealing with that same trauma from at 13 as a 13-year-old developmentally.
Wow.
So being able to talk and actually do something, again, having these particular groups, having your peers, and getting rid of this stigma that, people of color, don't see therapists because because you're crazy. No, sometimes just seeing a counselor is just having a conversation about something that you're going through. So there's a lot to it as it relates to the sleep and how a person goes to sleep. We have social media, and before, I should say, when I was coming up, the TV would go off at midnight, and then you see that little countdown. Where now. And then they would play the national anthem. Where now you got 24-hour TV, and so in order to get a proper amount of sleep or a good sleep, you have to turn off all of the social media, so that now you can rest your mind and get rid of all those stimulation or external stimuli, and then start to come down. Let's say about 20, 30 minutes before you go to bed. So those are different things that can affect your sleeping as it relates to the trauma.
Hey, Dr. Houston, you know what I'm hearing you talk about? I'm hearing you talk about the fight or flight. And when we talk about trauma and the experience that we've been through, we are programmed to be in one of two situations, right? Either we're fighting to stay alive, and this is back from an evolutionary standpoint, right? We're running from the bear, we're running from the tiger, or we are sitting down and we're having a meal, we're with our family, we're relaxing. And when people grow up in an environment where there's continual trauma, they're not able to flip that switch anymore. You get stuck in that fight mode, right? Anyone who's ever been in a fight, you know what it's like. You get hyped up. You're not worried about eating. You're not worried, or you're not thinking down the road. You are focused in on right now. And that heightened sense of emotions, that heightened sense of focus is good for a short amount of time, but it's not sustainable. And like you were saying, sleep is a way to break that cycle. Seeing a counselor is a way to flip that switch. And for our young men and boys of color who are living in that fight mode at all times, there's avenues to be able to channel it into a different mode and relax and take that step back, because it's hard to do when you're a heightened sense of emotion.
Yeah,
I appreciate that, Carter.